As you know, in 2026, agents are changing everything in terms of how you use it, how you delegate work, how much time you save, and how much more you can get done per unit of time. Agents are the new hottest thing in AI. But here's the thing now. Claude, ChatGPT, a lot of these very popular tools are becoming very, very popular amongst the public. So using Claude Code, Claude maybe a year ago, or any of these advanced AI harnesses, right, before it really became a buzzword, it's becoming more mainstream because now people are realizing that you can just download Claude Desktop, use Claude Cowork, Claude Code, ChatGPT, Codex, and the thing is, how do you differentiate or show or present new forms of value to the marketplace or in your workflows or to your job, whatever you're doing? And the answer is with highly advanced AI harnesses. So harnesses are like the new things. Like a year ago, it was basically around Claude Code. Like really what happened with Claude Code is they created one of the very first advanced harnesses, and you saw what the take rate was with the marketplace. Claude Code has been one of the most powerful coding agents used by developers, founders, non-technical people, and you see clearly what it can do, right? Mobile apps are blowing up, web apps are blowing up. You can literally just prompt with your voice and just typing in plain English. It's that easy. And when the marketplace catches up with it, with the general public, and they have the same access early adopters did a year ago, then you have very little differentiation. So the way you stand out is with more advanced agentic flows and setups on your computer. And in this video, we'll be talking about a new AI harness that is rising in popularity. I like it. I've been experimenting with it. It's called the Pi agent. And what we're going to be doing is we'll be going in my computer. I have some slides and some information to share with you, how I'm using it, how I define workflows with narrow agents and agent team leads, and how you can do all this yourself. Because when the general public has access to the same tools you have to figure out a way how to differentiate and how you can have an edge over everyone else. And right now, that is with AI harnesses and how you customize them. So let's dive right into the computer and I'll show you more. All right, let's get right into it. First off, shout out to Claude Design, man, because this thing just cooked up a fire slideshow for you guys. So shout out to Claude Design. Anyway, let's get right into it. So why did Pi agent just change everything for agents? So for those of you who don't know, harnesses have recently blew up, like just the buzzword term. I mean, it's been around for quite a bit. I mean, that's pretty much what like Claude Code is, or like some of these like advanced AI harnesses, where what they do is they give like a sequence of tasks, steps, rules, and general frameworks of like how these AIs can like perform and execute a task to the goal, right? And before we just get to some of these more advanced concepts, because I assume a lot of people are beginners when it comes to just say AI agents and they're just trying to understand what these things are. So let's just quickly have like a quick masterclass in terms of what narrow agents are, right? Before we get into like pi.dev and why this is actually something like game changer, right? So first thing is like, what is a narrow agent? So now when it comes to actually understanding what a narrow worker agent is, first understand just what a general AI chat agent is, or just a chatbot. You give it a prompt, response, that's really it, right? But when it actually comes to narrow worker agents, these things can have tools. They can have goals, they can have context, they can have some sort of RAG where they can pull and fetch information and then give you a more precise response. And when you give a agent or a narrow worker agent a task or a prompt, something to execute, it's going to be very narrowly defined and very good at executing that very specific task. So for instance, I may be doing a lot of copywriting. So let's say I create a lot of sales letters for say info products, for digital products. Let's say I wanted to have a narrow agent that is very good with copywriting. So there are a lot of famous copywriters out there, such as like Dan Kennedy, people like Russell Brunson. There's people like Alex Hermosi are quite good at copywriting. So imagine if you had a narrow agent that is very, very good at creating copywriting for your info products or your coaching business or sales letters or video sales letters, whatever it is. You give it a role, you basically fine tune it on good examples of what good copywriting looks like, different rules, definitions, different sorts of formulas and components of what comprises an excellent sales letter. And then what this narrow agent does is you give it the prompt and then it executes based on its knowledge, its tools, its resources to produce you maybe say a landing page, maybe say to produce you a transcript for a YouTube video or some sort of video sales letter asset, or maybe even some sort of ad. And the output is highly narrow and defined. So if I wanted just to have a narrow agent working primarily for video sales letters, it would only present and create sales copy for video sales letters. That's what it means by an agent being narrow. Or say you have a narrow agent for specifically info product sales pages. There's a narrowly defined agent that is excellent at creating sales letters for landing pages, right? It knows exactly the components to use on the landing page. It knows the structure. It knows how to create the headlines. It knows how to work with, say, a avatar, like the language it's speaking to the avatar. It knows exactly how to check through the whole entire landing page. And then the final output should, in theory, be a perfect sales page for some sort of offer that you're doing, right? But this can also span into creating YouTube thumbnails. It could be into reviewing code. It can also be into how you are producing viral TikTok content. It doesn't matter what it is. Whenever we create a narrow agent, it is specifically and defined for a very narrow task, and they perform and excel when they are very narrow. Because if you have just a general orchestrator or some sort of general purpose agent, it can become very bloated in terms of the output, how much context it's taking. Because I mean, in February, late January, when say OpenClaw started really blowing up, I didn't realize in the beginning how many tokens this thing was eating, right? But I spent over 1 billion tokens literally just using OpenClaw. I mean, that's like nothing compared to other people. But when it comes to say like, how many tokens these agents take up, I mean, that thing takes up so much tokens, right? And it can easily just decrease in performance in terms of like how much memory it has available, right? How many compactions it's done, how much of the initial context you initially chatted about is like polluted because it had to like compact itself multiple times. So narrow agents, they're always like very clean slates with low context, with enough context to get the job done, versus say just having a general purpose agent that can kind of do something, maybe not, whatever. Whenever we're creating narrow agents, we want these agents to excel at their specific tasks and roles we give them. And just because, like I just kind of hinted earlier, just because you give something more context, it doesn't always translate to better performance. I mean, now there are breakthroughs in AI where I think I saw like on X the other day where there's like some sort of breakthrough in AI where now you can have up to 12 million tokens in context windows with some sort of AI that just came out, which is ridiculous, right? But in general, just because you give an AI more context, it doesn't mean it's always going to equate to better performance. Because if you just kind of give everything at once, it's just going to have a messy sort of output. That's why whenever you start a new session with an AI, a chat, a thread, whatever, you tend to notice that the performance excels near the very beginning of a chat conversation versus say after a couple compactions, really long chat windows. It just tends to decrease in performance, and sometimes the AI just hallucinates answers and it just kind of pisses you off. So that's kind of what I mean here. And there was like a research study I saw where say when you add more context to the AI and you just bloat it with too much information, not only the costs rise by I think about 20%, but also the performance drops. So it's like a double-edged sword. You want to stay in the same chat because the context is there, but at the same time the performance is decreasing and your costs are increasing in terms of like usage costs, tokens being consumed outside of say like 256,000 context window or whatnot. Because when you go past say like 1 million tokens in a chat window or something like that, the costs tend to rise, right? And something that Pi agent does differently is that you want to have context for the right timing so it can inject it for the exact moment in time you need it. So you know how kind of like when it comes to like learning and right timing, I mean, that's just something I personally believe in. I want to learn information right exactly when I need it because I'll actually use it and apply it and see a change in my life versus say just learning all this information, having all this context, and then forgetting it, right? Like that's happened so many times and that's how I learn nowadays. And the same thing actually applies here to AIs. You want to give them the tools and access and ways how to navigate through their database or any sort of permissions or any sort of tools, access, information, whatever, so they can pull and fetch the context exactly when they need it to perform at their best at all times. And one thing that, especially if you are using these coding tools every single day and you're noticing the updates, how over time the prompts evolved, how you kind of can easily feel out intuitively Claude Code, Codex, whatever, they're becoming more and more bloated in terms of like say the biases, how say the system prompts are steering you towards their own products and suites versus competitors. I mean, you can kind of notice this when you're actually using the tools because it's like they're almost biased towards a certain set of answers or outputs or a certain way of performing something. That's why when you use all different tools, you can kind of get a sense and feel of like, hey, this one's really good at say sales letters, or this one's really good at design and front end UI and UX, and then this one's really good at solving hard technical problems. You can kind of notice it when you're using every single tool versus just being stuck to one. And over time, as you use different tools and your standard becomes greater for like what actually is great performance and what isn't anymore, you can kind of notice how say different models, they're more biased towards their answers or they don't meet a certain par or standard that you now have to yourself because a new competitor just created the new standard. And you can kind of see how, say, I mean, just personally from my own experience, how, say, Claude Code and some of these very popular tools a year ago performed significantly more different compared to what they are today. And my hypothesis is probably because of a combination of things. One is probably becoming more consumerized, and more general consumers are starting to use the product, right? Like recently, Claude just kind of blew the hell up, right? So they're probably trying to figure out, one, how they can get more consumers, more adopters, beat OpenAI, and like say their own like general marketing game, right? The other thing is probably like the system prompts and all the things that actually go into the actual agents, and then probably how they are modifying the prompts because of, say, it's becoming now a mass consumer product. You can kind of tend to notice a different sort of quality in output that the AI now is doing, right? So now the question is like, do we still keep on using Claude Code? Do we still keep on using Codex? Or what do we use nowadays, right? And I think now the next big thing is like, you, especially in like deep technical circles, and if you're like really following tech Twitter and stuff like that, you tend to notice this word of like AI harnesses, right? Like these buzzwords, like AI harness. Like what the heck even is an AI harness? An AI harness is pretty much like the engine behind the brain. So whether the brain is like Gemini 3 Pro, whether it's Claude Code, Opus, whether it's GPT 5.5, it doesn't matter what it is. You can think of it as a sort of framework, right? It's a framework of like having a core system instruction, different tools, a type of memory, guardrails of like what rules and what access it can use on your computer, what kind of code it can execute, what it can't do, verification loops like rechecks, retries, second opinions, what kind of agents it can spawn. So the harness is basically like kind of a skeleton, like a super simple skeleton. And then it has access to, like, you can imagine like you being at like a worker table and you having access to all these tools. And then there's probably like some simple general instruction of like, okay, like use this one, use this one, that. These are all the tools you can use. And whenever you receive a prompt, go execute the task, right? And with these AI harnesses like Claude Code, Codex, whatever, they have their own system prompts. They have their own instructions, memory tools, connectors, plugins that probably you can set for yourself, or maybe some default standard ones, community ones, whatever. And that basically what is harness. I mean, if you look at, say, OpenClaw was pretty much acqui-hired by OpenAI, right? Like the founder was acqui-hired. And that in itself tells you how much value there is behind harnesses. I don't know how much exactly this guy got acqui-hired for, right? But you can probably tell it was probably somewhere around 50 million or so. Like, I don't know, like this is just like a highball guess, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. But that dude's set for life. You see what I mean? And the same thing with like Claude Code. Look at Claude Code. Some guy on Claude's team created Claude Code, and this thing became like a multi-billion-dollar product. That's how much value there is behind a harness. Same thing with OpenClaw. Now there's some new harnesses out here going viral, like pi.dev, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and also like more recently with like Hermes, which is like more focused on self-learning and iteration. So you can see now that there is a lot of power in having a strong harness. And the thing about like harnesses right now is there is a bit of a technical barrier to entry because like there is more like custom technical stuff that goes into it. But nonetheless, if you know how to vibe code, if you know how to prompt, you don't need to be scared of that. You just kind of have to understand like the general underlying ideas, like core ideas, like what tools are, memory are, whatever, to customize your own AI harness. And then from there, take it to the next level and actually have an edge in your workflow, marketplace, your business, your product, whatever it is. And earlier, remember how we defined narrow agents? Well, there's this also new concept that is basically becoming quite popular, and that's called team leads. Because now you notice that, say, Meta, Block, a lot of these tech startups, they are creating mass layoffs of people. And why is that? Because now not only you can just replace narrow workers with narrow agents, but now you can begin to start delegating and removing people from your organization, which are, say, like in tier 2s, 3s, whatever. And by that, I mean, say, the management layers. Because now what you can have is you can have team lead agents that can delegate tasks and work to narrow agents. So imagine if there's this team lead agent, which you can call in this case the orchestrator. But I would even go as far as say there's an orchestrator above the team lead, where you can kind of think of it like the entrepreneur, the founder, the CEO, where then you can call different team leads. And these team leads could be specialized in certain areas or departments of a business. So one team lead could literally just be around, say, technical development. Say in this case, this is a technical development team lead, right? This team lead could be a technical developer agent where it has access to a front-end agent, a back-end agent. It could have access to a code review agent. It could have access to an agent that does market research. It could have access to, say, a product research tool agent, right? And basically what the team lead does is it can call and delegate its tasks to different agents in its arsenal. Because if, say, the team lead agent has like a max context window of, say, about 256,000 tokens, it's going to burn through those tokens if you give it a massive fat prompt to go and execute some task, right? Whereas, say, if you treat the team lead agent as like a mini orchestrator inside of your terminal, your workflow, your code base, whatever, it's going to preserve a lot of tokens. And it's actually what it's going to do is it's going to delegate work out to like basically mini workers that has access to, right? So it'll be like, hey, go create the landing page with the front end agent. Now use the back end agents because it has access to, say, Supabase, Firebase, maybe some other backend stack. And then that agent will go out there and create the backend. And basically the backend agent can communicate back and forth with the front end agent. And then once those two agents are done, then the team lead agent can be like, okay, like once we run these two agents in parallel, it will spawn the code review agent to make sure everything's up to par and standard and quality in terms of like brand guidelines, voice, copy, stuff like that. So you can see there's levels to it when actually you use agents correctly and how powerful they can be, because now you're not relying on one primary agent to have a bunch of tools and tasks, because it can easily inflate its context window, decrease performance, and for no reason inflate your costs. Whereas say you can keep context windows tight, isolated, and based specifically within context windows of whatever agent a task is being delegated off to, right? So the front end, back end, code review, whatever it is, this is the way, and this is what I see is being talked about in circles. And the one thing you want to, and I think the biggest shift that for me at least, which I'm going to show you here in the video, how I started thinking about team lead agents is that when it comes to narrow agents, they are to actually execute and delegate tasks, like hard tasks, not like in terms of difficulty, but like hard tasks where you have to get down and dirty. Whereas say for team lead agents, what you're delegating here is decision making. You're delegating decision making. So by the time the team lead agent has an output, a response, or some sort of completed checklist of things done by its narrow agents, now it can come back to the orchestrator agent or even you and be like, hey, I just created this. What do you think? And then ultimately, like at the end of the day, when you look at, say, billionaires and you look at some of the most richest people in the world, when you look at, say, super successful founder CEOs, what do they do at the end of the day? They just have a lot of leverage. And it's all because of their judgment and decision making. So the same thing is happening here on a smaller scale, because when you have team lead agents or orchestrators, what you ultimately want to do is have a system and architecture where you can delegate decision making. That is the key difference. Decision making for team lead agents and actual hard execution of like tasks, steps, things that actually you have to produce some sort of output with for narrow agents. So I'll go here in just a moment in terms of like how I built mine, but like how I kind of came to this is like, obviously I like to stay up to date with like everything going on. I started noticing this trend of like narrow agents and then these different team agents in OpenClaw. When the Hermes agent came out, I realized, yeah, like OpenClaw is missing that like self-improving loop. And I was curious to see how the Hermes agent was actually doing it itself. So I created like a trading agent off that where like it improves its feedback based on trades it takes. And eventually like I started hearing word and buzzword around like Pi and how it's more custom, how it's more lean. And the best thing about Pi is that like, let's look at it actually right now. When you look at Pi, the whole idea behind it is like, remember earlier, a lot of like when I mentioned about the harnesses, how a lot of them are bloated. There's a lot of system prompts. There's probably some sort of company biases, steering in terms of decision making and shit. So the whole idea behind the Pi agent is that it's yours. It's your harness. You can create it. Because when I created this thing, it literally had like no tools. It literally had like no tools, like nothing there. So that's why there is a bit of a technical barrier and stuff like that. Like when it comes to actually using Pi, is because you have to like hook this thing up. You know what I mean? You have to hook it up with like your own skills, your own memory, anything that's necessary. So here on their website, you can kind of just get a general idea of what this thing is, right? They didn't build in a bunch of like built-in to-dos, no plan mode, no MCP, no sub-agents, no background bash. And the whole idea is like, you want this thing to have full access to your computer, because when you give this thing full access to your computer, it can perform its best. And like, let's be real with ourselves. If you've been using AI agents, Codex, Claude Code, whatever, you've probably been using it on dangerously skip or like full agent mode, so it can actually go out there and do things, and it doesn't disturb one, your flow, and two, the process. So like you can literally just go do something and come back and the task is done, right? Like that's when these things perform best. I'm a high believer in it. I would just say be careful when you do that, because if you do and you don't know what the heck you're doing, this thing can delete stuff. So make sure you're always backing stuff up, or you at least have some sort of eyeball on like what these things are doing, so you can catch it in the moment of doing something stupid, so you can pause it, right? But you can download it here. It's for free. And then what you have to do is once you actually download it, you actually have to build it its own skills, tools. So here I just open up my Pi agent. So as you can see here, I have a few different prompts I created. I have some skills I created. I have some context. There was just a new update. But this thing, literally, when I created it, I literally had no skills on it. So what did I tell it to do? So, I mean, if you have like Codex on your computer, if you have like Claude Code, the first prompt I did was, first off, like after I connected it to my subscription, I'm using the Codex, my ChatGPT subscription on it. So I can run like the 5.5 model, 5.4 model, whatever, and then you can easily just switch between the models. You can use OpenRouter, doesn't matter what it is, but I'm quite happy that OpenAI, you can use their access token and you can just use your subscription plan on it. So that's probably the best way right now, because if you can use, say, the frontier model of like 5.5 on it, this thing really does cook. I'm telling you guys, this thing really does cook. But one of the first things I did, especially if you have like Claude Code, Codex, whatever, is the very first prompt you can be like, hey, can you copy the skills from, say, my Claude Code or Codex? And it's going to go through your computer, find like the claude.md file or any directories you have. Maybe you have like access to your OpenClaw directory, whatever. What you want it to do is to go into these directories and then from there, basically fetch the skills, the memory, key insights, and then import it here. Basically only the essentials. I wouldn't say import everything, because the reason why this is such a lean harness is because it doesn't, the idea is you don't want to have all that bloat and all that unnecessary stuff inside of this agent. You just want what's necessary. So like web access, maybe a few key skills, and that's about it. And then when it actually comes to like how I built my Pi agent team lead, I just want to quickly go over here because I didn't finish off the thread of like what I was talking about earlier. I just want to make sure you guys understand like what's going on here. So the team lead I built, just like kind of test and see how I can delegate out decision making, right, is with a team lead agent to help me make decisions on a few key projects. So right now I'm working with a creator in terms of working on one of their funnels. I'm also working with like another client on one of their funnels and one of their custom stacks. And what I'm doing, what I gave this team lead agent to is access to my primary Obsidian vault on my computer, as access to a context file of like who I am, my goals, my vision, my weekly goals, my monthly goals, my daily journals of over like a set amount of days. And as you can see here, when say I ask a question of like, hey, does it make sense to proceed forward with, say, this new feature or this insight or like this transcript of a conversation we just had, what do you think? It will go out there and it will, first off, it can search the web and like verify my facts with like parallel.ai. If you have access to like Firecrawl or maybe Perplexity or some sort of Bing search, it will spawn that agent to like gather information, scout this agent. What it does is scouts through my computer for different files, resources, different connections, vault synthesis. This is another agent I created that can easily scout through my Obsidian vault. And the way it scouts it is through vectored embeddings that I embedded my Obsidian vault with a Olama local model, so it can easily find the necessary files for enriched context through semantic search. Then the opportunity lead agent, it basically searches through my core files about myself. So my goals, my priorities, what I am thinking about in my Obsidian journal. So it has context of like what's going on right now in my life, right? Reviewer, it verifies everything makes sense and is in alignment with my priorities. And then this other agent where it's like a skillsmith. Do we build a new skill for this, a new process, a new system? So then when you actually prompt the team lead agent, what it does is it has access to all these agents. And then what it does is it gives me a final answer in terms of like, yes, no, this is why you should do it. This is what I got from this agent. These agents told me all this. And I'll show you right now like a quick example. I might have to like blur it out in terms of like some of the output that shows because it is showing personal information. But nonetheless, I kind of want to show you like an idea of like what I mean. So what I'm going to be doing is I fetch this link of like a new model that Meta released, and I'll be like, hey, based on my goals, do you think this is something we should consider for my priorities? Why or why not? So here I just prompt it for context, not to expose anything private. So hope you guys respect that. But I created a prompt here where we can do is we can prompt the team lead agent to be like, okay, opportunity review this, and it's going to spawn the team lead agent. Should this be a focus, right? So we're going to prompt it. And it's basically going to go out there and search through my computer. As you can see here, it first searched through some of its memory. The very next thing it did was it checked through some of its skills, what it has access to. It just spawned a sub agent to review my vault, to review web search. So there's two sub agents that are actually spawned right now. Now I just spawned a new agent. It spawned the opportunity lead agent. So it's checking some of its current memory. It's checking my Obsidian vault once again, and it just gave a TLDR, interesting but not right now, and then pretty much just gave a TLDR, so interesting AI neuroscience signal but not right now focus. So right now focus on revenue, funnel execution, and lean pi capability building, which is something I'm actually exploring on Sundays, where I can kind of like explore different AIs and just kind of be up to date with everything, and just some like other priorities I have working on. So it gave like actually the correct answer in terms of like, this is not the priority. This is just one of those things where maybe I can put on the side on like a Sunday or something to review, but it's not a priority right now. But you can imagine how powerful this is, say, in other workflows. The idea here, as you can kind of see here, is it spawned multiple subagents, some workflows. It went through my Obsidian Vault. It went through my priorities. It went through web search. It figured out what this thing even is on the internet. And it was like, it's an interesting AI neuroscience signal, but not a priority right now. So the idea here was it literally just delegated my decision making, whether or not it makes sense to focus on this or not. So it makes my life even more easier. Do we focus on this thing? Does it make sense? Is there anything we can do with it or not? If not, move on, or just maybe put it into, say, like a hobby exploration thing, and that's it. And that's the same idea I want to bring to you here, is that whenever we're using these team lead agents, especially working with tools like pi.dev or something like that, they're extremely powerful because you can call multiple subagents to go do something. You have more control over your harness in terms of like what tools it has access to, how lean something is, no bloat. You can see exactly what tools are being called, how this agent is running with like a lot of transparency. You can create custom prompts to be like, hey, like I created another interesting one. It's called orchestrate. So out of all the subagents I have this Pi agent access to, I'll be like, hey, orchestrate, and then build a landing page. So then it'll orchestrate some tasks to the front end agent, the back end agent, a code review. So you can create like a lot of like custom prompts to prompt this Pi AI harness to go out there and do things. And it is extremely powerful. I'm telling you guys, it's extremely powerful. But that's going to be it for the video. I just want to give a quick little insight in terms of some recent findings I found on like team lead agents, narrow agents, like some of the insights behind it. Pi.dev, this thing, I've been working with it in past, say, 2 weeks, just kind of cooking with it, exploring, learning more about it. So this thing is actually quite powerful. And I do see that there is a lot of value when you have control over your AI harnesses, what this thing can do, how much control you have over the system prompts, because like you can't control that in, say, like a Claude Code or desktop, right? But with the Pi harness, now developers and people who are technical, or they kind of have a sense of idea of like knowing what they can do with these AIs, these harnesses, especially when they are vibe coding. You have a lot more control in terms of like your workflow, your productivity, and you get a different quality of output. I'm telling you guys, like sometimes this thing just cooks way better output because there's no bloat there, right? But that'll be all for the video. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about AI agents, stuff like that, entrepreneurship, things I am learning and researching about that's quite interesting, subscribe to this channel. Let me know if you want to see more, and thanks for watching. See ya.